Larry, we've got leftist lunatics taking over. Wonderful to see you. How you doing there today?
Doing fine. Buttoning down the hatches. They're coming for us, Jason.
Yeah, tell me
But
about it. I know.
we can handle it. It's 10 of them against one of us, two of us. Odds slightly in our favor, as Batman used to say.
We've got an interesting graphic here. Of course, this is one of my mock-ups. Of course, Ilhan Omar is not being deported, but this is wishful thinking, right, Larry? We can have a positive attitude. I want to make sure everybody knows that they can support you and your work by going to freedomwatchusa.org. Everybody knows, Larry, that you started Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch. And, it's interesting. You and I were talking a lot last week about some of the different motions that I'm bringing and stuff. How is it that I, as a pro se, with just the money from the generous viewers who watch this show, I'm able to do things that seem to be moving the judicial branch more than your former colleagues over there at Judicial Watch? But we won't focus on that too much. They get
Well,
documents.
Jason, you're very bright, and that helps. And you become the equivalent of a lawyer, better than most lawyers, frankly, over all these years
Thank
in
you,
your
Larry.
litigation, your personal litigation, and otherwise, and following what I do and what others do. So, hats off to you. And you have some very innovative ideas that we're going to try out in our new Department of Judicial and Legal Accountability to reform the legal system and to get honest and ethical judges who follow the rule of law and just don't do what they feel like doing ideologically to the left or rhino Republicans or whatever the case may be. And we can talk about that later. But you put up this meme of Ilhan Omar, and this is a very interesting story, is that it was our good friend and colleague, Laura Loomer, who uncovered initially that Ilhan Omar, this congresswoman from Somalia, or should I say Minnesota? Sorry, I got it by mistake, which is basically the same thing. It's
Yeah.
not funny actually, that she married her brother to get a green card. And then she won up that to get citizenship. In addition, she was accused of tax fraud. And I actually prepared, this is years ago, during the first Trump administration, a, a complaint for an investigation with the goal of having her deported back to Somalia. I mean, she hates this country. She hates white men in particular and white people generally. And she has committed immigration fraud. She should be the first that shepherded out of this country and sent back to Somalia. But, it was at that time, it was convenient for President Trump and the Democrats, excuse me, the Republicans, to leave her in power. She became, a lightning rod. But the time has now come with much better people around President Trump. I think he's doing an excellent job. It's time for him, given all the courageous things that he's done, basically to just have her arrested and give her due process, let her have a trial. She's indicted herself, and have her shipped out of this country permanently. And that'll be a warning to the other clowns up there, whether it's Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez or Rashida Tlaib, her Bobbsey twin. That's Ilhan Omar's Bobbsey twin. By the way, Rashida Tlaib assaulted Laura Loomer years ago when
Yeah.
she went to an event, grabbed her cell phone violently. I brought a lawsuit. It went to a Michigan judge, and the case was dismissed. It was, wired. But we
Wasn't
made the
it?
point.
Didn't Keith Ellison have something to do with it? Was it Michigan or Minnesota? That one too.
Oh,
Keith Ellison?
yeah, I got it mixed up. Michigan, Minnesota. Keith Ellison was the attorney general at the time. Keith Ellison is a disciple of the ultimate anti-Semite, Louis Farrakhan, disgrace. I mean, that state has become a disgrace, in terms of the left. They're good people that are there. Michelle Bachmann's a good person. Other people are good. Minnesotans are good people generally, but there's some really terrible leftists up there. And so these are the individuals that are helping to foment violence today. So you have AOC, who was out on the airwaves recently, saying that if Democrat members of Congress are arrested, there's going to be hell to pay. She was, in effect, a threat to violence. You've got Ilhan Omar saying white men are the cause of most crime in this country, that they should be persecuted in effect. And then you've got others out there like the minority Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, calling for violence. You've got Cory Booker calling for violence. They're all calling for violence. You've got that clown up there in Minnesota, Tim Walz, calling for
Oh,
violence.
yeah.
You've got that overstuffed pig, Prisker in Illinois, calling for violence. I mean, he couldn't do much harm anyway. He couldn't run fast enough to catch you.
Right. Well,
He
Larry, let
ran,
me ask you this. There was this
you
big
know,
incident that just happened in Newark, right? And we've heard everybody, they're up in arms. They're like, oh, you can't arrest a mayor. They seem to have forgotten that they arrested the President of the United States.
absolutely. And years ago, they were about ready to arrest Nixon too. So yeah, that's complete nonsense. But I'll tell you something. Take your hats off to Alina Habba that ordered that arrest, and take your hats off to Pam Bondi, who have been taking courageous stands and even arrested a couple judges recently. And it's good to send that message. And we at Freedom Watch, as you know, Jason, because you actually filmed many of them and helped orchestrate them, is that we intend to indict these judges for violating their oath of office. They should be doing, give them 90 days in prison to think about it, so maybe it'll sober them up. But the fact is that you violate your oath of office, that is a crime. And they're administering to the law, not with regard to the rule of law, but who you are that appears in front of them. And that's been true for an extremely long time, which is why I started Judicial Watch in 1994 and now, run Freedom Watch, which does today what Judicial Watch used to do, hard-hitting lawsuits. But this is the type of thing that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed quickly because this country is going to go up in flames. It's going to go up in flames relatively shortly. The more President Trump has success, the more they're going to get vicious, and they are vicious, and they're armed, and they're coming for us. And I suggest that people do arm up themselves, not to use offensively, but use defensively in the event that someone comes after you.
Yeah. Now, Larry, last time you and I spoke, definitely indicting judges. I'm excited about it. I've been, as you just said, taking kind of a unique approach. You and I spoke last time about the fact that I had entered a motion-seeking leave to file as an amicus in the Signalgate case, and Judge Boasberg just blocked it. Extrajudicial, extra-constitutional blockage. I overturned him with a Rule 59E motion, and I've done another thing since then that I think you're going to be proud of, Larry. I've said it many times. You've been my Mr. Miyagi in the world of law. You used to tell me to do things and I had no idea what you were talking about. But now I've written many affidavits and I've shoved many motions up judges' asses. But I've come up with a unique theory, basically just alerting these judges that they have forfeited their judicial authority under Article 3's Good Behavior Clause. Now, I've already filed this in the D.C. court, and it should have been on the docket today. Tomorrow is the last day I'm going to tolerate. They say it takes 24 to 48 hours, but I'm going to have to start calling them again. There's a new judge who's going to receive one of these notifications, and he's new in many ways. He's new to this process. He's new to the bench. His name is Dale Ho, and he's a judge in the Southern District of New York. He was an ACLU lawyer previously before he was appointed by the demented former President Joe Biden, and he's been presiding over this USA versus Eric Adams case. And the issue there is Judge Ho has the audacity. He did this to me as well. I tried to move as a amicus in his case, and he said in a generalized order that he had received some voluminous amicus briefs and he wasn't going to allow them in. And in putting together one of these judicial authority forfeiture motions for this guy, I discovered that in his individual rules, he has a special set of rules for pro se movements where he's decided extra-constitutionally that he gets to decide if a pro se's motion ever even sees the docket. So he has established in a written practice a rule that supersedes the federal rules of procedure, supersedes the local rules of the Southern District of New York, and most grotesquely, supersedes the Constitution and the First Amendment. What do you think of that, Larry?
Right. Well, it also violates the Sixth Amendment, which gives you a right to appear pro se. But New York has very peculiar rules in federal court. And I remember going way back with some crazy judges years ago when I was younger and practicing law, is that in New York, you generally don't file a motion initially in federal court. You ask the court for permission to file the motion. Right. And that in and of itself is unconstitutional. It's a denial of due process, because you should be able to file the motion. In case it's denied, you can then take it up on appeal. Now, I suspect you can file it, make a proffer. This is what I was going to say, and preserve your right for appeal. But there's a tremendous arrogance in New York. And I remember one time I was representing an Italian client, my best client at the time. McAfee was the name of it. I was in private practice before I started Judicial Watch. They made it revetments. They had, most of the market share worldwide. It was a simple commercial case. And I had just uncovered the Chinagate scandal. And my case was assigned, and I write about this in my book, Whores, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment, which you can get on Amazon and freedomwatchusa.org. I wrote about the fact that the first day of trial, it was before a Judge Denny Chin. I mean, just really a vile human being, Denny Chin. He was the head of the Asian Anti-Defamation League, and I like Asians, and it has nothing to do with that. But he saw prejudice around every corner, and this was just a simple commercial case. But it occurred right after I had uncovered that John Wong was put in the Commerce Department by Bill Clinton, allegedly to spy. Well, he did spy on the American people there. He got access to a lot of commercial information, classified information, being briefed by CIA people. So when I walked into that courtroom with Denny Chin, the whole courtroom was filled up with Chinese. I couldn't understand why. What interest did they have in this case? But the Democratic committee was calling me a racist against Chinese, and I actually had many Chinese clients and friends.
Wow.
And people working for me who were Chinese. So Denny Chin, asked me, why did you, I told him to recuse himself from the case. He made certain bigoted remarks, essentially, like these others are doing, and he wouldn't do it. He held me out to dry, and he sanctioned me at the time. I hired Ramsey Clark, who was the Attorney General under Johnson, under President Johnson. He had the same difficulty with him at the time. It's a really interesting story. It's in my book, Whores. But it shows you just how ideological these judges are. But when I took the decision up on appeal to the Second Circuit, it went in front of the chief judge. His name was Judge Newman. And I wrote a little footnote in the brief talking about how many times the judge that preceded Denny Chin, and also the conduct of Denny Chin, how many times they had been reversed by the Second Circuit. And this Judge Newman took offense. He says, "How dare you write that these judges were reversed this many times?" I said, "What's the matter with that, Your Honor? It's the truth."
Yeah.
Yeah. They protect each other, and they do whatever they want. And New York is one of the most arrogant. I try to stay out of New York, okay, if I can.
It's not a bad idea, to tell you the truth.
As bad as the District of Columbia, frankly. And the only difference is that the judges in New York are generally smarter than D.C. They're Wall Street lawyers that got shot up there with campaign contributions, but they are intelligent, but they're also very partisan. But this is the attitude of the judiciary. Do not question me. I will do what I think needs to be done. I don't care if you have legitimate concerns about the fact that I may have a bias against you. You're representing an Italian client. Because I asked him, I said, why are all these Chinese in the courtroom? Right? I mean, what's going on here? So it's kind of
that had to go over really well.
Yeah. And then he asked me, he said, "Are you asking me to recuse yourself?" And I said, "Your Honor, I'm asking you to search your soul." He really hated that one.
Wow.
I said, "You decide whether to recuse yourself, but you've shown some bias here against my client." And my client has nothing to do with my work at Judicial Watch. It's a private case. It was my law firm that was handling it. And he injected that into it because I had uncovered, this is the part that I left out, that he had been recommended to the bench to Bill Clinton by John Wong, the Chinese spy at the Commerce Department. That was the linchpin that drove him over the edge. Because I asked
because it was probably true. The judge could have been a spy there to manipulate. Let's stay on this for a second, Larry, because this is important. Someone might say, "Oh, Larry is just making fun of judges." First thing I want to do is compliment you, because I have had the opportunity to see you in court, and it's what the stories you're telling. if anybody gets a chance, Larry in court is so skillful and funny in the things that he's saying. I can see that the judges would get pissed off because you make them look stupid. But we got to talk about something else for a minute, because just last week, and there's been
Well, let
virtually
me add
nothing
there
about
before
this.
we do that I'm always respectful to judges, but I talk
Yes,
straight to them,
yes.
as equals, not as
But they don't
superiors.
take that straight talk. They don't
They
like
don't
that.
take it.
That's
And I
the
was respectful to Chin too,
right.
you know, by the
But the thing that happened last week, Larry, is that they unsealed, in this case that Dale Ho is presiding over, which is the United States versus Eric Adams, they unsealed something like 1,700 pages of FBI previously classified evidence, and it was showing all kinds of foreign straw donations to his mayoral campaign from Turkey and Uzbekistan, the use of Signal and other encrypted apps to conceal criminal conduct, including destruction of phones, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. I mean, this is really serious, toothy allegations in an indictment, encrypted device and avoidance techniques. This is a lot of stuff, matching fund fraud. So what I did in this whole motion that I'm dealing with Dale Ho on is that I'm saying that, look, this is a serious matter because the judge is essentially working with, this is a lawfare case. Trump, this was an unprecedented move, Larry. We had a Deputy Attorney General, Emil Bove, you might recall in February and March, all of the prosecutors resigned because they refused. They didn't want to withdraw the case, and the Deputy AG so insisted that they do it, he did the unprecedented in U.S. jurisprudence maneuver of actually appearing pro hoc vice himself and prosecuting the case. Do you remember that detail? It didn't get much coverage.
yeah, generally. I mean, you were telling me about it. Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. So I had this whole piece here describing how this was a lawfare case against Donald Trump. And I just don't know, he's so busy dealing with international, global politics that I just don't know if he's dialed in on this. And that's how they're trying to get him, in my view.
Yeah, we'll do anything they can. But this is, another situation. What you've seen with the prosecutors here and quitting and everything like that. Uh, there probably is a lot here against Eric Adams, but Trump cut a deal with him. He wanted him on his side, so they cut a deal. It was like a plea bargain in effect.
But the
So
thing that's unique about it,
he now
we
owns
need,
Eric Adams.
but we need
He's
your input
shining
on
on
this. We need your
Jews.
input on this, Larry,
Yeah,
because correct me if I'm wrong. The purpose of a plea bargain is ordinarily an individual has the Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate themselves. And so if the prosecutors want to leverage a defendant to kind of level up and get the kingfish in an operation, they say, hey, let's make a deal. If you agree to waive your discretionary right to not say anything and you tell us what you know, we'll agree to not prosecute you because we want to get the bigger guy. In the case of Eric Adams, first of all, he's the biggest fish in this conspiracy, so there is no level above him. And second of all, he wasn't agreeing to testify or do
well,
anything.
it
He
wasn't a
had
plea
to
bargain.
follow federal law.
It was a Trumpian plea bargain. Okay, he was trading it off. That's what he did, and he felt that he needed the support of the New York mayor, and that it was worth cutting, this deal that they would dismiss the indictment. But there's a flip side of this too, and you have to take it with a grain of salt. And I'm sure, Jason, that you're correct. There's a lot of evidence against Eric Adams, but again, hearkening back to the days that I was at the Justice Department, I remember wanting to prosecute an individual in North Carolina, Andy Troxler of Troxler Enterprises or whatever it was, who broke bond and sent carcinogenic sleepwear to kids in Venezuela at the
Whoa.
time. And I couldn't do that because the U.S. attorney in Greensboro was politically connected. And that was one of the things, again, I wrote about in my book, Horrors. I guess it's getting a lot of play during this show, Horrors, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. That was one of the things that soured me on the Justice Department. And I then moved from this section, it was the Consumer Affairs section of the Antitrust Division, to the section that broke up AT&T, which was rewarding. We had really committed people there, and we got the job done. We broke up AT&T and created competition, which we benefit from today. But I saw that politics. And I'm an ideologue, I'm a purist. It disgusted me, is that we could only bring a criminal case against the corporation, which then went bankrupt. So there was no justice at all.
Not the individuals who did it.
The individuals who did it,
Wow. Wow. Well, let me just give you the bottom line on this because I'm concerned that it's not the last act in the Eric Adams case. And I don't know that Trump made this deal so much as he was tricked into it, because what I'm predicting next is, first, this has all just happened last week. So the legacy media outlets are going to begin speculating that Donald Trump pressured the DOJ to drop the Adams case for corrupt political motives. Norm Eisen, Andrew Weissman, and the chorus of clowns on MSNBC will pound that narrative until the lie hardens into perceived fact. And once that perception is solidified in the court of public opinion, some other rogue prosecutor will attempt to bring obstruction and conspiracy charges against Trump. And with Letitia James' credibility in shambles, whoever that is remains unclear. But Larry, I'm telling you, the rest of this prediction can be taken to the bank, just not the kind of bank that gives Andrew Weissman $1 million loans 5 days before going into FDIC receivership.
I agree with you. They'll probably use this. But then again, and here's the flip side again. I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate. Is that here you had Eric Adams that started to mouth off against Biden and Harris and how they were handling the immigration. So, I mean, I can assure you probably 90% of all politicians in this country have committed crimes. Okay.
True.
I mean,
this is serious, though.
Right. This is allegedly serious. But the fact that the Biden Justice Department went after Eric Adams was predictable. Years ago, James Trafficant from Youngstown, Ohio, became very critical of Bill Clinton. And he wound up getting indicted too and removed from Congress as a result. And he was appearing on all the shows. You could expect the same thing to happen with, what's his name, the senator from Pennsylvania.
Menendez?
No. I'm having a little blank moment here. Senator Fetterman. Yeah, they're coming after him too. Now they're trying the psychological thing to say he's crazy because he supports President Trump in many respects. Wow. This is what they do. It's vicious.
He might be crazy, though.
It's exactly what I said, Horace. Well, you can be crazy and still make a good point, right?
You get the guy in the Carhartt jacket. I don't know. We'll see what happens with Fetterman. Now, Larry, we're getting close to the end of our opening segment here, but people are going to be able to join us for part 2 of this particular discussion. They can do that by going to your Substack. I don't know if people are aware that Larry is on Substack, so join us there. Larry's Substack is larryclayman.substack.com. You can also sponsor his work at Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org. And of course, people can see the simulcast on any of the Crowdsource the Truth sponsorship channels. And thanks to everybody who's sponsoring the show on subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Odyssey is switching payment providers, so if you're on there, you're going to be able to see the broadcast, but you can't sign up now for new subscriptions. You can join us on any of these other channels, and of course, people who subscribe to me on X at JG_CSTT. We'll be back in 5 minutes. We got a lot more to talk about with Ilhan Omar. And Larry, just let everybody know what we're going to cover in the next segment real quick. We got about 2 minutes.
In addition to Ilhan Omar and AOC and Rashida Tlaib and all the other miscreants and leftist criminals, let's talk about what's been happening in the courts lately. There was a decision in San Francisco where Trump was enjoined temporarily, TRO, that he can't reorganize the departments in the executive branch. Virtually every department he was enjoined in laying people off in reorganization. It was outrageous. This judge, a elderly woman on senior status, never married. You probably can put 2 and 2 together in San Francisco. Okay. And, hates his guts. And
but it's important that we don't be perceived as making fun of that. This is a pattern. Valerie Caproni fits that as well. And do people of that description really represent the majority of the United States of America, or are they a fringe minority of leftist ideology?
No, they're a fringe minority, but they're also in control. Okay.
Right.
Federal judge is very powerful. We can see that. And
right.
She enjoined him, from every department in DC and throughout the country, from reorganizing, from doing anything. And she doesn't care. She's there for life. She's in senior status. What the hell? We'll enjoin him. And there was another one judge there, Alsop, that enjoined Trump in San Francisco from letting go provisional workers, in the various executive branch agencies. They were there just, on a temporary basis. He couldn't even fire them. So this is what Trump is up against. We can talk about that. Somewhere between 60 and 70% of all of his executive orders have been enjoined by leftist judges, George W. Bush judges, Rhino judges, and a couple Reagan judges who were so old they probably didn't know what they were doing. Right.
Well, we'll get into all of that, Larry.
It was discovered today that he has a nodule in his prostate. So, nobody wishes any harm to him. We just want him to go away, but he may not be long for this world.
Well, yeah. We'll be back in just a little bit. Thanks for tuning, everybody. Stay with us and join us.